Hello, everyone. Now, it's a bit late when I'm doing this broadcast. I'm still in London at the moment. I'm at my dad's. I'm planning to go home tomorrow. I am going to be going home tomorrow because, you know, I've got shit to do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I learned from spending time with my family and also just give everybody a little snippet as to what's going to happen in the future. So the first thing is, I came to spend time with my family this year, but due to the death of my great aunt, it's all kind of hit us. It's hit us really badly. Like for me, it still hasn't sunk in. I know for a lot of other people, it still hasn't sunk in. And of course, my grandmother is devastated. She suffered with a lot of loss this year, so we've all just rallied round her and made sure she's all right. Really just really taking care of her. And it was nice to be around that energy. Now, I've already told you guys before, um, like a couple of my relatives are gang stalkers, like more than a few, and I know that. But I decided to make peace with it, and I decided to be there for the people in my family who are either loyal to me or who aren't gang stalkers. So it was important to me to be there for them at the very least, especially during this time. And when it came to a couple of my relatives who are younger than me, um, they have basically it's a time honored thing where when it comes to every generation, the next generation almost always succeeds where the latter generation failed. And in this particular case, these two cousins of mine have uh, both been in university. One of them actually has a master's now, um, which is amazing. And some of the experiences that they've been through leading up to this point, um, I don't think spoiled is the right word, but I think the right way to call this is that they've been properly supported. And I think as a result of that, they've been able to do things that I wasn't able to do. And I had to mingle with a lot of feelings of, well, some feelings of inadequacy. I had to wrestle with that. I also had to wrestle with some jealousy that, I wasn't getting as many presents as I used to and all that type of stuff. It's part of getting old, isn't it? Like you're not going to get as many presents as you used to, especially if you don't spend that much time around the family, and I don't spend that much time around them. So there are all these little petty things that can bring about feelings of insecurity and envy. But then when I think about not only what my cousins have achieved, but what they're about to do with those accomplishments, my pride and my hope, it completely outweighs any envy, any insecurity that I might have. And the reason for that is like where somebody like me has power in being a misfit and, can affect change on a lower level at the fringes, people like my cousins can affect change on a structural level. They have structural power. I'm witnessing so many black women, and I should have been one of them. But I'm witnessing all these black women with structural power, my cousins, my younger cousins with structural power. It really gives me hope. And the reason why it gives me hope is because down here in the fringes, we're dealing with corruption. We're battling against systemic corruption. But at the top, they are working with optics to make sure that the people who are disenfranchised, maybe not targeted individuals because targeted individuals are not taken care of from the top, but people at the top from marginalized backgrounds, just the optics of them being where they are, it makes a real impact on all other marginalized groups, whether we know it or not. That's why a lot of black people have had to fight just to be seen, have had to die just for the right to be seen, have had to be brutalized, even to this day, just for the right to be seen. because the optics are highly, highly important. People are more responsive to optics than to actual action, right? They're more responsive to how something looks than how something works. So having cousins who have masters and who have degrees, who find themselves in positions where they can affect real change, that is not a small fucking thing. For any black woman to find herself in that position, for any young person to find themselves in that position, to any queer person, any any person of an alternate religion from an immigrant background, for them to find themselves in structural positions of power, even if they don't do that much from where they are, the fact that they are seen there is highly impactful. So this is why I can feel jealous about the fact that I didn't get all those presents and I didn't get all those holidays. And I can feel jealous about that, sure. But look at what they've been able to do with that. Look at what they're going to do with that. I've always said that gang stalking is an intersectional thing. It's not just about targeted individuals. It's about all the systems of oppression that help to reinforce gang stalking. You can't talk about gang stalking or being a targeted individual without talking about the black community or the brown community or the queer community or women or queer people or children. You can't talk about the targeted community without talking about all these other groups. Because the marginalization that targeted individuals go through is intersected, it's intermingled with these other groups. And also, before I get into anything else, you've got to talk about the traveler community, anybody on the fringes. You've got to talk about poor white people too. You've got to talk about all these people, because victims of Havana syndrome, targeted individuals, and electrosensitivity victims, it's all interconnected. And the reason why so many of us are being kept apart is because we are not honest with ourselves about the privileges that we have. That's the first thing that keeps us apart. And the second thing is that we use our marginalized status, whatever marginalized status we have, as weapons against one another. And we don't bother to consider that, the various diverse skills, knowledge, and experience that we have could actually help our cause if we are willing to work together in spirit and physically do what we are best at. And I feel like when it comes to my cousins, when it comes to TIs, they're not going to be able to do anything about TIs. But them being there, it can help black people and black women in particular. Where they're going to work, it can help the people that they are actually working with. There is so many different opportunities for them to do some actual good, even just with the bare minimum there, because they will have structural power in a way that I won't. I can't do the bare minimum because I don't have structural power like that, but they do. That structural power to be able to affect how marginalized communities are treated is going to have a direct effect on how targeted individuals are treated. Let me give you an example. If you are more likely to be medicated if you have a poor education, or if you come from a specific background, if you're more likely to be forced with medications, then having black people in the medical profession, however seemingly meaningless that gesture is, it actually has an impact on how black people are treated by the medical profession. It has an impact on how black people are treated by the medical profession. It also has a direct effect on how other people of marginalized groups, like if you come from a family that didn't go to college, if you're the first one that went to college out of your family, like all that type of shit, it affects people directly from the background that you come from. It affects them directly just by having you there represent them. So if you are a black doctor or you are a black nurse and you know that there are black people who are more likely to be medicated, it means at the very least that distinction between how black people are treated in psychiatry and how other groups are treated in psychiatry has to be looked at. And if that has to be looked at, then anybody else walking through psychiatry has to be looked at. How are we treating people in accordance with their racial group? How are we treating people in accordance with their gender? Just by having the optics there, people have to ask questions. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say structural power, which does the basic bare minimum. It affects the way everybody else behaves because everybody is focused first and foremost on how things look. How do you think that affects the targeted communities? When people start asking questions about how medications work, how psychiatric care works. What happens when people start asking questions about human rights from the top? What happens when people start asking questions about how people are medicated and sectioned? What happens when people start, how does that affect TIs? Really think about it. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say TIs and all other marginalized groups are intersectional. I didn't explain it very well, but it basically boils down to this. Anything that the top does, even with the bare basic minimum, it affects how the rest of the world behaves because they want to be seen to be good people. They want to be seen as good, like intelligent and fucking, brave people. They want to be seen as that first and foremost. And you have to make them feel that way. And if the optics don't make people feel that way, then they'll either do one or two things. Either they'll rebel against the status quo or they will fall in line. But the optics are the things that affect people's sense of self. And the fact that my cousins are in a position where optics matter, that is incredible work. I can't even lie. I'm not even going to hold it against them. They're in a place where optics matter. And like I said, I'm not going to say exactly what they've been doing, but I am going to tell you the position that they're in, it could have a very positive effect on what TIs go through. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say when it comes to gang stalking and anything to do with intersectionality, we can't count anything out because how marginalized communities are being treated is going to filter down to us. And what we do in our fight against gang stalking is going to filter upwards as well. It's a mutual effort thing. It's not just like a singular effort thing on one side. I keep telling TIs over and over again that it is not, I keep telling TIs over and over again, it is not a case where everybody does the same fucking thing. That does not reveal solidarity. It has to be a situation where everybody is on the same page in spirit. That's what it's about. All of us are going to be doing our own thing in the TI community. There are some of us who are going to be lobbying, well, not lobbying, but there are some of us who are going to be appealing to politicians, aiming for political influence. There are people like me who are going to have their own businesses or do something in the creative sector. There are targeted individuals that are working with their own forms of military science, creating frequency jammers and the like. There are going to be people within the TI community that are heading up prayer groups and prayer meetings and spiritual divisions. There are people who are going to be writing letters to the UN. They all count. So this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say how I feel about my relatives is like, I'm proud of them more than anything else. And I feel hopeful for the future because if marginalization is being taken care of from the top, then it's going to be taken care of from the bottom as well with the work that we do. It's about diversity of skill, not diversity in in why we're doing it. So like having diverse skills and diverse groups all working towards the same goal, all working towards the same ends. That's the most important thing, and that is a proper long-term solution. What's not a proper long-term solution is everybody doing the same fucking thing for different reasons, because it's only a matter of time before those groups splinter. Having everybody in one group doing the same thing, it might be okay for getting your foot in the door briefly, but it's not going to be long until that group splinters, because then all the differing motivations are going to come out, and when they come out, they lead to clashes, and we're right back where we started. So for me, it's important to have diversity of skill and position, but spiritually, lighting the beacons and working towards the same goal. So that's what I learned from the Christmas period here. I learned that where I am, it's not where I'm meant to be, but it's where I am right now. And from where I am right now, I can affect real change of my own. But I have my own way of doing it. I don't have the structural power that my cousins and my relatives have. I have a different kind of power. I have a different kind of power, a more raw kind of power. And it's a lonely kind of power, but it's power that can definitely be used and has been used to great effect so far. It does give me hope for the future. It gives me hope. The only thing, that I'm trying to work out is that where that leaves me with my family. I just, it's very complex how I feel about them. But yeah. Anyway, I wanted to know. Oh, hang on. No. Also, I wanted to tell you guys, I went to see Wicked during Christmas Eve. It was a brilliant movie. That's probably a very radical Hollywood film to put out there. And I don't just say this as somebody who's a black woman or somebody who's like queer or whatever. I actually say that as somebody who was a TI as well. That film is radical as hell, because there are certain characters that I relate to more than Elphaba or Galinda in that movie. And they represent TIs in a nutshell. I see animals with a capital A being put in cages, being lobotomized so they can't speak. If that doesn't remind you of TIs, I don't know what does. You could easily say that for immigrants too. That the lobotomy so they can't speak could be metaphor for immigrants as well. Like, there's so many things that can be interchangeable with the animals. But for me, when I see animals with a capital A, like animals that can talk and things like that, I think of fringe communities that are often dehumanized on a regular basis. That's why they're animals in the story. And when it comes to whether or not I relate to Elphaba or Galinda, I'm fully a Galinda. Fully. That's why I can't stand her ass. That's why I found her absolutely ridiculous. It's because like, when it comes to societal conventions, I fall into these things on my own. I just don't do them as successfully as Galinda does. That's the only difference between me and her. I don't do it as successfully because I'm not petite. I'm not white. I'm not blonde. I was petite once upon a time, but like, I'm not white and I'm not blonde and I'm not fucking rich. Even though I come from a rich family, it doesn't mean that I'm rich. You feel me? Right? I'm not rich, and as intelligent as I am, I'm not educated very well because I came from a troubled home. So, and I reacted badly to that troubled home. So I'm fully a Galinda. Like, that's why I can't stand her ass. It's just too familiar to me. Elphaba, I liked. Elphaba because she was, she saw through a lot of people's bullshit. She was very defensive, don't get me wrong, but she saw through a lot of bullshit. She understood that the world wasn't as good as they painted themselves out to be, and she was always ready to defend herself because of how people treated her due to the color of her skin, which was green. So, no, I'm fully a Galinda though. I'm just not. I'm just not physically a Galinda, right? But where me and Galinda have stuff in common is that we both understand that social dynamics are everything. That's one of the reasons I went so feral as a kid, is because my insecurity just overwhelmed me. I thought, fuck it, I'm never gonna be normal. I'm never gonna be perfect. So I just decided to wild out when I was a kid and when I was a teenager, and even as a young adult, I just thought, fuck it, I don't care. I did care immensely, but like, no, no, I was a Galinda at heart. I was. I worshipped popular culture. I still keep abreast with popular culture. Like, I'm not behind on it. It's just that I'm not in the position to get the kind of clout that she does. But my hatred of Galinda is not actually out of jealousy. It's purely because of the way she treats Alphaba. I can't stand that shit. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand her. I just felt like she was ridiculous. And the only time when I actually started liking her was when Elphaba started interacting with her, is when, yeah. But this is my thing. As much as I despised Galinda, as much as I hated her, um, I hated the Ozians far more than any of the other characters. Like, I hated the Ozians more than Madame Morrible, even more than the Wiz. I hated all of them. Because how the fuck are you going to be so consumed with trying to avoid your own pain that you're going to cause massive amounts of pain to somebody else just because they're different to you? Just because you don't want to deal with your own pain and you want to avoid the pain in your own life, you need a good enemy to rally behind rather than looking at your situation realistically and taking responsibility for the pain that you're in. I hated the Aussies so fucking bad. Like, the first shot that came up and everybody was celebrating that the Wicked Witch was dead, I was just sitting there like, just fucking die. I hate all of you. I hated them so bad. Because the Aussians, to me, they're not just a racist mob. They're not just, a queer phobic mob. They're the kind of people who would have easily become gang stalkers in real life. And they are the type of people who become gang stalkers in real life. That's why I hated the Aussians way more than Galinda, way more than Elphaba. Elphaba was actually my favorite. Way more than Madame Morrible, and I couldn't fucking stand that bitch. And way more than the Wiz. Way more than any of these characters. I hated the Munchkin Governor. I hated, Nessa Rose I didn't really hate, but I didn't like her. I hated the Munchkin Governor and Bok. Those two, let me tell you something, right? Those two, you understand? They put their love in all the wrong places, made stupid choices that hurt everyone else, and yet, because they don't want to deal with their own pain, they blame somebody who's different to them to the point where they become hateful. I can't stand, they're so evil. I couldn't stand those people. But yeah, coming back to the animals with the capital A, TIs, I identified with them more than any other character, because this is the thing that nobody really talks about. You got black people inserting themselves into Alphaba. You got queer people inserting themselves into Galinda and Alphaba. You got women inserting themselves into both the women in Wicked. But this is the thing that nobody really considers and nobody really talks about in Wicked. And that's the fact that both Galinda and Elphaba are privileged women. Let me explain. Elphaba is privileged because not only was she raised by the governor of Munchkinland, she was raised by a powerful man, came from a powerful family. not only does she have privilege that way, but she's also privileged because she is literally the daughter of the Wizard of Oz. She's the daughter of the most powerful man in Oz. So two powerful men were her fathers. And she grew up in a life of almost complete privilege. If she wasn't green, she might have been a Galinda figure if she wasn't green. But she grew up in privilege, let's be clear. The color of her skin was the only thing she had to consider, again, because Aussians were so fucking vicious about it. But the color of her skin was literally all she had to worry about. She didn't have to worry about where her money was coming from. She didn't have to worry about, how good she looked, because even though Elphaba was green, she was fucking stunning. She was a really cute little girl. And as a woman, she was absolutely beautiful. She was a stunning woman. The only thing she had to worry about was the color of her skin. And when you have all kinds of other privilege except for the color of your skin, the color of your skin is something that you get fixated on because everybody else is fixated on it. So that's what you focus on. And for Elphaba, how people treated her skin color became something that she formed her personality around. And I'm listening to all these other Black creators on YouTube and on social media talk about this. Most of them, have degrees and have businesses and came from the military and were theater school brats. So the people who relate to Elphaba and the people who are telling us to relate to Elphaba, like quite a few of them have some privilege of their own. And it's the same with queer people. That's the part that's not being said out loud. There's one thing that distinguishes Elphaba from everyone else. But if you really step back and look at Elphaba, like really look at her critically, she's still incredibly privileged, and she still could have been in the position where she could have used her privilege to gain some kind of structural power so that she could actually have gotten what she wanted, which was the animals freed. And the animals, being, not being subjected to craziness anymore. She could have easily had that if she went that way, but she chose not to because of the color of her skin. She chose to let that one piece of marginalization run her. Granted, she deserved to feel proud of who she was. She was a beautiful woman. She deserved to be happy. She deserved to do things for herself after all the crap she'd been taking from the Aussians. She deserved from that. She deserved that. She deserved to be able to fucking defy gravity. She earned it. She more than earned it. But she was still a privileged woman. If you want to really look at the fringes of society, look at the fucking animals, bro. Look at the fact that when it comes to the animals, it didn't matter how talented they were, how intelligent they were, they still got locked up in cages. They still, they were still locked up in cages. They were still snatched from their homes. They were still lobotomized. It didn't matter how smart they were. That's the real shit. That's the real shit. Elphaba wasn't given the benefit of the doubt by very many people, but she could have had powerful people on her side, and that's what nobody talks about. They were using her. They weren't genuinely kind to her, but she had powerful people on her side still. There were people who recognized her power, her sorcery. So she's still very privileged, and nobody ever talks about that because it's not fashionable to talk about it. And of course, Galinda's more privileged than her not by a mile, but Galinda's still more privileged than her because, Elphaba's father was a governor, and Elphaba's real father is the wizard, so she's powerful, but Galinda comes from aristocrats, so, but yeah, there's still a relative amount of privilege there, and I feel like the more privileged you are, the more that one thing that you're marginalized for stands out, and that can actually cloud your judgment as to what other people are going through. And I think that's what happens Again, I've called out my own people for this. I've called out Black people for the way that we treat mentally ill people, for the way that we treat queer people. Do you seriously think those Mad Girl choruses came mostly from white people? No, they came mostly from Black people when I was a targeted individual. They still come from mostly Black people. When I come here to Harlesden, most of my gang stalkers are fucking Black or brown. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Most of the people doing street theatre come from marginalized communities because they allowed their oppression due to arbitrary differences. They allowed that oppression to cloud their judgment and to stop them from recognizing the other privileges that they actually have. The privilege of being cis, for example, cisgendered, the privilege of not having mental health breathing down your neck, the privilege of not being a targeted individual. All these things are privileged or are privileges. And when you miss that, you harm the purpose of intersectional activism. You harm these things because you don't recognize your own privileges. And although Elphaba was very kind and very empathic, she still didn't recognize the privilege that she had. She was just focused on her skin. And again, I don't blame her. She was being targeted for that. But if she was really looking at the situation clearly, she would have recognized she has other privileges. Even though her dad hated her because her dad's a prick, she had other privileges. She could have used them. She chose not to. So, you know, and that's what a lot of Black and brown people do, a lot of women do, a lot of queer people do. If they can hide behind their marginalization in order to get out of being accountable for things, then they will do it. Even if it means they hurt people in lesser positions than they are. Poor whites as well. If they can get away with it, they will. They focus on their marginalization so hard, they miss the other privileges that they have, and they miss the transference that they project onto other people because of what they've been through. Whereas the Galindas of the world, well, when your whole life you've been catered to and you have nothing to worry about, whether or not you're a good person, it depends entirely upon two things. One, how you're raised, and two, the nature of your character. If you're the type of person that only cares about another person when they've done something good for you, you're just a fucking bad person. It doesn't matter whether you're privileged or not. But if you care about somebody, just for the sake of caring about them, if you care about somebody's humanity, then you care about somebody's humanity, and no amount of privilege is going to take that away from you. You know? But privileged people, yeah. Again, with privilege, it's all optics. A lot of privileged people are not truly happy. Because again, it's about gaining friendships by just fitting an arbitrary aesthetic and doing the bare minimum. Who has a happy life like that? Who has a truly happy and fulfilled life that way? Nobody. You know what I mean? And it does make you a self-absorbed person. It does make you selfish and spoiled and thinking that everything should be about you. Like, it does make you like that. And like I said, I recognize Belinda because again, even though I don't come from I'm not rich myself, come from a relatively rich family. So I know spoiled when I see it. Okay. And that can also cause its own harm. When you're spoiled and when all you care about is other people's approval, you know, you do end up doing more harm than good in the end, even when you don't mean to. But yeah. And it really made me think about my relationships because most of my relationships are with privileged people, meaning men and people who are not Black, right? And what I realize is that the reason why they can afford to be so personable and kind with me is because systemically this world was built for them. It's easy to be kind to other people when this whole world is built around your viewpoint. It's easy to have nothing to worry about when this world is built for you. It's easy to be more relaxed and to be less guarded when you get easily discouraged. And this world is strategically built to stop you from feeling that way for too long. And that's exactly what Galinda went through. You know, and people like that, they make the world worse. And and honestly, it never occurs to them to be any other way, because why would you have to? You're in a world where you don't really have to learn anything if you don't want to, and that causes its own kind of problems. We've seen it. you know I wasn't going to talk about Wicked this much, but you know yeah, this is the thing that human beings do. We you we abuse the privileges that we have. And then when the time comes for us to actually be accountable for the way that we treat each other and ourselves, whatever marginalized status we have, we like to throw that around as if it means something. Especially when we find ourselves having to be accountable for how we treat people who are more marginalized than we are. That's one of the reasons why, like, every time I go onto Empress Justice Tarot, I make sure that I make sure I include trans people because I'm cis. I make sure I include, you know, queer people like gays and lesbians and stuff because I'm bi. If I wanted to pass for straight tomorrow, I could do it. You know, I make sure to talk about immigrants who had to come to this country with nothing and work their ass off, because I'm not rich. My parents were not rich, but we come from a rich family. So I speak for people who don't have certain privileges, even if they end up doing better than me, which a lot of them do. Even if they end up doing better than me, I still speak up for them, and I still try in my own way to do what's right for those people. Because when you check your own privilege and you use it towards helping people rather than using it to abuse others, you help make the world a better place. And when it comes to my marginalization, I simply use it as an excuse to take care of myself. I'm big, no problem. I'm black, no problem. I'm a woman, no problem. I'm a bi, no problem. I will pour as much love onto myself and what I do as humanly fucking possible. I'm certainly not going to use it as a way to excuse my own actions. Ain't no way. I'm a human being first and a black woman second. So I'm not about to sit here and say that, even though I've been through a lot, I know I've been through a lot, I claim that, I understand that. I just pour enough love onto myself so that I can remain steady and take much accountability for my actions as possible and move through life with as much grace as I can. Because that's the way you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to abuse your privilege. You're not supposed to, and nor are you supposed to use your marginalization as a get out card when you get called out for your shit. Like, no, enough of that. You know? And another thing that I realized made me a bad person, well, I've never been really a terrible person, but I realized that what made me can't even say bad really compared to what other people have done to me. I have to say annoying, right? Like, what made me an annoying person is the same reason why I hate the Aussians so much. It's because throughout my life, I have tried to avoid pain. ironically, the more you avoid pain is the more that you hurt emotionally. The more afraid you become, the more cowardly you become, the more loveless you become, the more shallow and unintelligent you become. It's, it's not like people deserve to suffer for who or what they are. It's not like we're talking about that here. It's just that when you go out of your way to avoid pain or avoid disappointment, you become evil. I've seen that in my gang stalkers. I've seen that in my enemies. They come after me because they want to avoid pain as much as they possibly can. That's why they're so much more ruthless with annoying people than they are with genuinely evil people. It's a preemptive measure. They're trying to avoid pain, or they're trying to take their pain and transfer it onto something that, from a perspective of optics, that person is annoying or dangerous and must be stamped out quickly. But when you do that, you become an evil person. When you go out of your way to avoid pain, that's what makes you evil. I mean, sure, don't go out looking for trouble like I have. Don't go out looking for pain just to find out how you measure up against it. You don't have to do that. But if you avoid pain to the point where you can't sit still for one moment to sit with discomfort or to sit with disappointment, you can't sit with that for one moment. You've got to project that onto somebody. You can't sit with discouragement for one moment. You have to project that onto somebody. That's not good. And unfortunately, privileged people, men, white people, even brown people, straight people, cis people, we find ourselves in, well, I'm not straight or white or male, but we find ourselves in the position where we don't have to accept pain if we don't want to. And ironically, that's what makes the lives of the privileged even more painful, because we're trying to avoid pain. That's what makes us miserable and evil and sad and cowardly and loveless and dumb. Just trying to avoid pain constantly to the point where you just can't help but to try to transfer that onto somebody else as quickly as possible. That's how we get so much injustice in the world and so much violence in the world and so much oppression in the world. The avoidance of pain. The avoidance of pain. Ironically, it brings you more pain. And that's what I've been surrounded with my whole life. People trying to avoid pain as much as they can. And again, it's one thing to bring that on yourself, and it's one thing to go out looking for it. But avoiding it to the point where you can't sit with it for 1 second, not good. Not good. That's how violence is born. That's how oppression is born. It's one thing not to let things fester. It's another thing to be that fucking fragile. That's what causes wickedness. I never expected to talk about the Wicked movie for that long. I never expected that. But yeah, I learned a lot this Christmas. From my relatives to the Wicked movie. Yeah, that's a radical movie. Don't let nobody fool you. That part one, radical. I don't know about part two. I haven't seen it yet. But part one is radical as fuck. Like, yeah, a lot of themes going on there. So, yeah, I realize I have my own power. It's not structural, but it's potent. And the irony is that the enemies who are trying to stop me being powerful, I'm powerful because of them, not in spite of them. I'm powerful because of what they're doing. So if you're a TI and you've made it this far, let me know how you guys are doing. I always want to hear from you. How has your Christmas been? You know, how have you spent it? You know, did you eat, drink, and be merry? You know, was it a sober time for you? Was it a somber time for you? Was it a joyous time for you? I always want to know. I want to know how you guys are doing. And when it comes to Empress Justice, I've got plans in the pipeline. I'm going to expand Empress Justice. Not Empress Justice Tarot or astrology. Empress Justice. I'm going to expand her. It's time. So watch out. Stay tuned. There's stuff coming. Okay? So peace and blessings. I love you guys so much. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.